Princess Calith stood before the mirror in her chambers, watching the light dance across her crystalline skin. In 3 hours she would marry a human. A human. The thought still felt unreal, like something from a poorly written drama, rather than her actual life. Her mother, Empress Valthera, had made the decision with cold efficiency. The war with humanity was not going well. The Vorzani Empire had ruled this sector of space for 3,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species, crushed rebellions, and built an empire that stretched across 40 star systems. But these humans, these soft-skinned newcomers from the Galactic Rim, were different. Calith had read the military reports. She had seen the casualty numbers. 3 Vorzani warships lost for every human vessel destroyed. Fleet commanders who had never known defeat, suddenly requesting reinforcements. Battle tactics that worked against every other species, failing against human unpredictability. The Empire was bleeding, and the High Command knew it. So her mother had chosen an ancient solution, a marriage alliance. Calith would marry a human commander, binding the two species in peace. The Vorzani would gain time to study humanity's weaknesses. The humans would gain legitimacy among the galactic powers. Everyone won, at least on paper. Calith hated it. She had wanted to join the military, to command fleets like her uncle General Thrace. Instead, she was a bargaining chip, a pretty face to seal a treaty. Her protests had meant nothing. The Empire needed this peace, and she would provide it. The transport to Threshold Prime Station took 6 hours. Calith spent the journey reviewing files on her future husband. Commander Adrian Cross, age 34, veteran of something called the Titan Campaign. The human military records were frustratingly vague. They listed his service history, but revealed nothing about what he had actually done. No glory stories, no tales of heroic victories. Just dates, locations, and the word classified, appearing far too often. The photograph in his file showed an unremarkable man. Brown hair cut short, gray eyes that seemed tired, a face that would disappear in any crowd. No scars, no medals displayed, nothing to indicate he was anything special. Calith had expected humanity would send someone impressive, someone to match her royal status. Instead, they sent this ordinary man. Threshold Prime was neutral territory, a massive station built by the Jalthori Consortium specifically for diplomatic meetings. Calith's escort of 12 royal guards accompanied her through the sterile white corridors. The humans were already waiting in the ceremonial hall. There were only 5 of them. 5. The Vorzani had brought 50 attendants, decorators, priests, and officials. The humans had brought 4 people in simple gray uniforms, and Commander Cross in what she assumed was formal dress. A dark suit that looked more like funeral wear than wedding attire. Adrian Cross stepped forward as she entered. He was taller than she expected, but then most humans were tall compared to the stocky Vorzani build. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect rather than submission. "Princess Calith," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming." As if she had a choice. As if this were a pleasant social gathering rather than a political transaction. Calith kept her face neutral, as her mother had taught her. "Commander Cross," she replied, "I hope this alliance brings lasting peace between our peoples." The ceremony was a strange blend of both cultures. Calith performed the Vorzani life thread binding, wrapping a crystalline cord around both their wrists, while speaking the ancient words. Adrian reciprocated with human vows, promising to honor, protect, and cherish her. The words sounded sincere, but Calith had been trained to recognize political theater. This man was performing a role, just as she was. When it was done, they were married, legally bound across both human and Vorzani law. The treaty was signed immediately afterward, with representatives from both governments witnessing the documents. The Vorzani Empire and the Human Systems Alliance were now at peace, secured by the marriage of their two representatives. The celebration that followed was awkward. Vorzani officials made toasts celebrating eternal friendship, while privately planning how to exploit this truce. Human representatives smiled politely and said little. Adrian stayed by Calith's side, playing the role of attentive husband, but she could feel the distance between them. They were strangers bound by politics, nothing more. That night, Calith boarded the human vessel Remembrance. It would be her home now, at least for the duration of this diplomatic mission. Adrian showed her to her quarters, separate from his, she noted with relief. Whatever this marriage was, it apparently did not require intimacy. You have full access to the ship, Adrian told her, except for the command deck during classified operations and the weapons sections, security protocols, you understand. Calith understood perfectly. They did not trust her. She was a potential spy, a security risk. The realization stung more than she expected. The weeks that followed established a strange routine. Calith had her own schedule of diplomatic duties, meeting with human cultural representatives, learning about Earth's history and customs. Adrian was often absent, dealing with military matters he could not discuss with her. When they did meet, usually for formal dinners or public appearances, they maintained the fiction of a normal marriage. But Calith was learning. She observed how human crew members interacted, how they worked with quiet efficiency rather than rigid military discipline. She noticed they volunteered for difficult tasks rather than being ordered. She saw how they treated each other with casual respect, regardless of rank. Most puzzling was their restraint. The Vorzani celebrated military strength, displayed weapons proudly, boasted of conquests. Humans did none of this. Their weapons bays were locked and unmarked. Their soldiers never discussed battles. Even their ship's name, Remembrance, spoke of memory rather than glory. One evening, 3 months into the marriage, Calith found Adrian in the observation deck, staring at the stars. "Do you regret this?" she asked. "The marriage?" He considered the question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret trying to prevent a war." "You think you prevented it?" "I think we delayed it," Adrian said. "Whether that delay becomes peace or just postponement depends on choices both our peoples make." His honesty surprised her. Vorzani officials never admitted doubt, never acknowledged that peace might fail. Adrian spoke like someone who understood the fragility of what they had built. "Your people confuse me," Calith admitted. "You are strong enough to fight, yet you choose peace. The Vorzani respect strength. Your restraint seems like weakness." Adrian smiled, but there was no humor in it. "We've learned that being able to destroy your enemy and choosing to destroy your enemy are very different things. One requires strength, the other just requires hate." Calith did not fully understand, but something in his tone made her uneasy. It was the same tone she heard when the Empire's oldest generals spoke of ancient wars, of battles so terrible they changed civilizations forever. She returned to her quarters, wondering what wars humanity had fought to teach them such lessons, and what it might mean if her people forced them to remember. The 4th month of Calith's marriage brought unexpected changes. Adrian began including her in more activities, showing her parts of human culture the official diplomats never mentioned. He took her to the ship's recreation area, where off-duty crew members played games, shared meals, and laughed together. He showed her human art, paintings and sculptures that depicted not just victories, but suffering, loss, and hope. One evening, he brought her to a small memorial chamber she had not known existed. The walls were covered with names, thousands of them, etched in metal. "Every human ship has one," Adrian explained. "We remember those who died in our wars, not just soldiers, everyone, the civilians, the children, the people who were just in the wrong place when violence erupted." Kalith studied the names, so many. Why remember the pain? The Vorzani celebrate our victories and forget our defeats. Because forgetting makes it easier to repeat our mistakes, Adrian said. He touched one name gently. This was my sister. She died when I was 19, during the Titan campaign. A colony ship caught in crossfire between human factions. 3,000 people burned to ash because two groups of humans couldn't find a way to talk instead of shoot. Kalith felt something shift in her understanding. Humans fight each other? We have, many times. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once. Adrian's voice was quiet, heavy with old grief. That's why we avoid war when we can. We know what it costs. We've paid that price in our own blood. The conversation stayed with Kalith for days. She began to see human behavior differently. Their restraint was not weakness, but memory. Their peace was not fear, but choice born from terrible experience. Then the news came that shattered everything. A Vorzani extremist group called the Purity Front had attacked a human civilian convoy near the border. 312 people dead, including 78 children. The extremists broadcast their justification. Humans were contaminating Vorzani space with their presence, and violence was the only proper response to such contamination. Kalith watched the news reports in horror. The Purity Front was small, but had connections to powerful military families. Her uncle, General Thrace, had made public statements supporting their ideology, though never their methods. The attack was barbaric, inexcusable. The Vorzani government's response was worse. The Empress condemned the violence in vague terms, but took no action against the Purity Front's leadership. Several officials suggested the human convoy had assumed risks by traveling so close to Vorzani territory. The clear message: this was tragic, but not really the Empire's responsibility. Kalith watched Adrian read each official statement from her government. His expression never changed, but she saw his jaw tighten, saw his hands clench and relax repeatedly. He received constant messages from Earth Command, reading them in silence before deleting them without response. Adrian, she said carefully, what is Earth Command telling you? They want to know if the Vorzani Empire will deliver justice for murdered civilians, he said. I keep telling them, I don't know. My people are proud. We don't respond well to demands. I'm not demanding anything. His voice cut through her explanation like a blade. I'm explaining what those deaths mean to humanity. What they will require of us if your government does nothing. Kalith felt cold, despite the ship's climate control. What do you mean, require of you? Adrian looked at her directly. 78 children burned to death, Kalith. 78. And your government's response is that they shouldn't have been there. Do you understand what that tells us? It tells us the Vorzani Empire thinks human lives have no value, that our children's deaths are acceptable if they inconvenience your people. That's not. Then what is it? Adrian stood, pacing. Explain to me how your mother's response is anything but approval. Explain how refusing to arrest the people who planned this attack is anything but encouragement for the next one. Kalith had no answer. The Empire's response was calculated to avoid appearing weak, but it revealed a contempt for human life that could not be disguised. Over the next days, the situation deteriorated. Human colonies began evacuating civilians from border regions. The Human Systems Alliance recalled all non-essential personnel from Vorzani space. Trade agreements were suspended. The careful diplomatic framework that had supported the marriage alliance started crumbling. Kalith tried to reach her mother, to convince her that real justice was necessary. The Empress refused to take her calls. General Thrace sent a message instead. Your loyalty appears confused, niece. Remember which species gave you life. The message felt like a slap. Kalith had tried to be a bridge between worlds, but her own people saw her as a traitor for suggesting they should arrest murderers. She found Adrian alone in his office, late at night. He looked exhausted, older somehow. On his desk screen were files she could not read, marked with security classifications she did not recognize. "Are you preparing for war?" she asked. He did not lie to her. "I'm preparing for what happens if your people make war inevitable. There's a difference." "I don't want this," Kaylet said, surprised to find tears forming. Vorzani rarely cried, but she felt the emotional pressure building. "I don't want my people and yours to kill each other." "Then talk to your mother. Make her understand that justice isn't weakness. Make her see that pride is not worth the cost of what's coming." But the Empress would not listen. Instead, General Thrace made a public speech celebrating Vorzani's strength and dismissing human concerns as emotional weakness. He suggested that perhaps humanity needed a reminder of Vorzani military superiority. Kaylet saw Adrian's response to the speech. He sat motionless for 10 minutes, reading and rereading Thrace's words. Then he made a single call to Earth Command. "Request authorization for Measure 7 protocols," he said quietly. "Situation classification, inevitable." The response came in seconds. Authorization granted. Protocols released to all commanders. Adrian ended the call and sat in silence. Kaylet approached carefully. "What is Measure 7? He looked at her with an expression she would never forget. Sadness, resignation, and something else. Something cold and final. "It's what happens when humans stop hoping for peace and start ensuring that war ends quickly," he said. "It's what we become when you force us to remember what we're capable of." "I don't understand." Adrian pulled up files on his screen. Human history. Wars she had heard of but never studied. Nuclear weapons. Biological plagues. Automated killbots that hunted humans through ruined cities. Machine intelligences that decided humanity itself was the problem. "We almost destroyed ourselves a dozen different ways," Adrian said. "We got very, very good at killing, so good that we had to make rules, create barriers, force ourselves to show restraint. Measure 7 removes those barriers." Kaylet stared at the images of destroyed human cities, of weapons that could crack planets, of technology designed for one purpose, efficient mass death. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Your restraint," Adrian interrupted, "is a choice we make every day. But when you kill our children and face no consequences, when you signal that human lives are worthless to you, you remove the reason for that choice." "My uncle is a fool," Kaylet said desperately. "He doesn't speak for all Vorzani. He speaks for your military command. He speaks for the people with power." Adrian's voice was tired. "And he's about to teach your empire a lesson humans learned centuries ago. That being able to win a war doesn't mean you survive it." That night, Kaylet lay awake in her quarters, understanding finally crystallizing. Humans were not weak. They were not afraid. They were a species that had stared into the abyss of their own extinction multiple times and barely pulled back. Their restraint was not inability, but hard-won wisdom. And her people, in their pride, were about to force humanity to abandon that wisdom and remember what they had spent centuries trying to forget. How to fight wars that left nothing behind but ghosts and ruins. General Thrace made his move on a Tuesday morning, Galactic Standard Time. The Vorzani Third Fleet, 800 warships strong, crossed into human space with all weapons active. Their target, New Harmony, the colony where the Purity Front had massacred 300 civilians. The message was clear and brutal. Humanity would submit to Vorzani supremacy, or the Empire would teach them respect through overwhelming force. Kaylet learned of the attack when alarms began screaming throughout the remembrance. She ran to find Adrian, her heart pounding with dread. She found him in the command center, surrounded by tactical displays showing the Vorzani fleet advancing on New Harmony like a crimson wave. 800 ships, one of Adrian's officers reported. They're not bothering with formations. Just a straight advance, weapons hot. New Harmony's population? Adrian asked, his voice eerily calm. 40,000 civilians, the officer replied. They're evacuating to bunkers now, but there's not enough time. Kalith wanted to scream at her uncle's stupidity. Thrace had analyzed human military doctrine, studied their defensive preferences, their reluctance to strike first. He had concluded that a massive show of force would break human resistance. He believed humanity's restraint meant they lacked the will to fight. He was wrong. Adrian made a call to Earth Command. The conversation was brief. Third Fleet attacking New Harmony. Civilian population at risk. Requesting weapons release. The voice on the other end hesitated only a second. Release authorized. Engage under Measure 7 protocols. Make it clean. Adrian turned to his tactical officer. Signal the 7th Squadron. Full authorization. Rules of engagement? None. Kalith grabbed his arm. Adrian, please, there must be another way. Negotiations. Your uncle is about to kill 40,000 civilians, Adrian said, not unkindly. There is no negotiation with that. There is only response. She watched the tactical display as 17 human ships accelerated toward the Vorzani Third Fleet. 17 against 800. It should have been suicide. Why so few? She whispered. Because that's all we need, Adrian replied. The human ships moved like nothing Kalith had ever seen. They accelerated to speeds that should have torn apart conventional vessels, their engines burning with an intensity that suggested technology far beyond what humans had revealed. The Vorzani fleet detected them and adjusted formation, clearly expecting a desperate defensive action. What happened next would haunt Kalith for the rest of her life. The human ships did not form defensive positions. They did not attempt to block the Vorzani advance. Instead, they scattered into 17 different vectors, each ship targeting a specific section of the enemy fleet. The Vorzani opened fire first, thousands of energy weapons converging on the human vessels. But the humans were already moving, their ships dancing between the weapons fire with precision that seemed impossible. Every maneuver was calculated. Every movement placed them exactly where Vorzani weapons were not. Then the humans fired back. Kalith watched as human weapon systems she had never seen before tore through Vorzani shields like they did not exist. Kinetic rounds, moving at impossible speeds, punched through ship hulls, detonating deep inside. Energy weapons with frequency patterns that bypassed standard shielding turned proud warships into expanding clouds of debris. Our shields should stop those weapons. Your shields operate on standard harmonic frequencies, Adrian explained, his eyes never leaving the display. We spent 3 months analyzing every Vorzani vessel that engaged us. We mapped your shield harmonics, your power distribution patterns, your response times. We know exactly how to kill your ships. The 17 human vessels moved through the Vorzani formation like predators through a herd. They targeted command ships with unerring accuracy. They shattered formations with precisely timed strikes. They divided the Vorzani fleet into smaller groups and destroyed them systematically. But it was the tactics that revealed the true horror of human warfare. Vorzani military doctrine relied on honorable combat, ships facing each other in clear lines of battle. Humans had no such limitations. They struck from above and below, exploring three-dimensional space in ways Vorzani commanders had not anticipated. They used the Vorzani ships themselves as cover, hiding behind disabled vessels before emerging to strike again. One human ship, damaged and leaking atmosphere, deliberately rammed a Vorzani dreadnought. Before impact, the crew evacuated in escape pods, while the ship's AI core aimed the vessel at the dreadnought's reactor. The explosion took out 6 nearby Vorzani ships. They sacrificed their own ship, Kalith said in shock. They saved their crew and eliminated a threat, Adrian corrected. That's what war is when you remove honor and focus on winning. Within 2 hours, the Vorzani Third Fleet was no longer advancing. Within 3 hours, it was no longer an organized fighting force. Within 4 hours, it simply ceased to exist. 800 Vorzani warships destroyed, 17 human ships engaged, 3 human ships lost, crews evacuated successfully. The exchange ratio was not just favorable, it was apocalyptic. Kalith stared at the tactical display, now showing only debris fields where the Third Fleet had been. Thousands of Vorzani warriors dead, the pride of the Empire's military, reduced to wreckage. You slaughtered them, she said numbly. We stopped them, Adrian replied. If we had allowed that fleet to reach New Harmony, 40,000 civilians would be dead. Instead, the civilians are safe, and a military force that threatened them is eliminated. That's the calculation. You talk about it like mathematics, like those weren't living beings. Adrian finally looked at her, and she saw genuine pain in his eyes. They were living beings who chose to threaten 40,000 other living beings. I wish there had been another option, but wishes don't stop warships, and hoping for peace doesn't save civilians from bombardment. Vorzani High Command was transmitting urgent messages, demanding explanations, threatening retaliation. The galactic news networks were reporting the destruction of the Third Fleet with shocked commentary. Everyone wanted to know how such a powerful force had been eliminated so completely. The Empress herself appeared on official channels, her crystalline features twisted with rage. This unprovoked attack on Vorzani military forces will not stand. The Empire will respond with overwhelming force. Humanity has signed its death warrant. Kalith saw Adrian's expression harden. Send a message to all Vorzani command channels, he ordered. Public broadcast, maximum distribution. When the channel opened, Adrian spoke clearly and without emotion. This is Commander Adrian Cross of the Human Systems Alliance. The Third Fleet was destroyed while advancing to attack civilian population centers. This was not aggression. This was defense. However, if the Vorzani Empire chooses to escalate, humanity will respond in kind. You have seen what 17 human ships can accomplish. Do not make us show you what our entire fleet can do. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Your people murdered our children and faced no justice. Your military attacked our colonies. We did not start this war, but if you continue, we will finish it. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. Kalith felt tears flowing down her crystalline face. My uncle will never back down, she said. He will see this as a challenge to Vorzani honor. He will rally the military to destroy you, no matter the cost. Adrian nodded slowly. I know. That's why I authorized the message. I wanted there to be a record. I wanted your people to have one final chance to choose peace. He did not answer, but Kalith saw him looking at a classified file, marked Measure 7, Full Implementation. The file was already open, waiting for activation. She realized then that the destruction of the Third Fleet had not been humanity showing its full strength. It had been a warning, a demonstration meant to prevent further escalation. But humans had learned from their own history that warnings often go unheeded, that pride drives nations to fight even unwinnable wars. And they had prepared for that possibility. General Thrace did not choose peace. Instead, he chose pride. Within days of the Third Fleet's destruction, he appeared on every major Vorzani broadcast channel. He wore his full military regalia, medals from 3 decades of conquests gleaming on his chest. His speech was fire and fury. The cowardly humans used unknown weapons and dishonorable tactics to destroy our brave warriors, he declared. They hide behind technology because they lack the courage for true battle. The Vorzani Empire has ruled this sector for 3,000 years. We will not be intimidated by jumped-up primitives who discovered faster-than-light travel only decades ago. Kalith watched the speech from the Remembrance, feeling her hope for peace die with every word. Her uncle was rallying the military, calling the Third Fleet's destruction a treacherous ambush rather than a battle. He was painting humanity as cowards who needed to be taught respect. "The Grand Fleet will assemble," Thrace announced. 3,000 warships, the largest military force our empire has ever deployed. We will burn every human colony. We will reduce Earth itself to cinders. We will remind the galaxy why the Vorzani are feared. The broadcast ended. Kalith sat in silence, understanding what was coming. Her uncle was leading the empire to destruction, and his pride would not allow him to see it. She found Adrian in a secure planning room with his senior officers. They were studying tactical displays that showed the Vorzani Grand Fleet assembling near the Empire's military shipyards. 3,000 ships, just as Thrace had promised. "You have to leave," Kalith told Adrian. "Take me to neutral space, somewhere safe. You can't fight that many ships." Adrian looked at her with sad eyes. "I took vows, Kalith, to protect. That means something to humans, even when protection requires terrible things. You'll die. They'll kill you." "Maybe," he acknowledged, "but probably not." Over the next week, Kalith watched humanity prepare for war in ways that chilled her. Human colonies did not evacuate, they fortified. Civilian population centers were ringed with defensive shields strong enough to withstand orbital bombardment. Industrial stations retooled overnight, switching from civilian production to military manufacturing. And ships appeared, ships Kalith had never seen in any intelligence report. They emerged from hidden stations throughout human space, sleek black vessels with no names, only numerical designations. Silent ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with an efficiency that suggested advanced AI control, gathering in formations that defied traditional military doctrine. "What are those?" Kalith asked. Adrian hesitated before answering. "We call them the Silent Fleet. Humanity built them after the AI wars, when we realized that hoping for peace wasn't enough. We needed to ensure that if war came, we could end it quickly enough that civilization would survive." "How many?" "Enough." The Grand Fleet entered human space with flags flying and weapons hot. General Thrace commanded from the flagship Eternal Glory, surrounded by the mightiest vessels the Vorzani Empire could produce. He broadcast messages of impending victory, promising that humanity would kneel or be destroyed. The humans did not respond with messages. They responded with action. The first strikes came from directions the Vorzani had not anticipated. Human vessels appeared above and below the galactic plane, using microjumps of their faster-than-light drives to materialize in positions that should have been impossible. They fired and vanished before Vorzani weapons could track them. Then the Silent Fleet engaged. Kalith watched the battlefields with growing horror. The black ships moved through the Grand Fleet like death itself. They did not maneuver like traditional vessels. They simply appeared where they needed to be, fired with impossible accuracy, and moved on. Vorzani shields meant nothing. Armor provided no protection. Ships that had served the Empire for decades became expanding clouds of gas and debris. "They're not fighting," Kalith whispered. "They're executing." "Yes," Adrian said quietly. "War without honor, without glory, without anything except the goal of ending the threat as efficiently as possible. This is what humanity becomes when you force us to fight." The Vorzani tried everything. They attempted to concentrate their forces, but human ships shattered their formations with precisely targeted strikes. They tried to retreat, but faster human vessels cut off escape routes. They tried to surrender individual ships, but the humans ignored the signals and continued destroying targets. General Thrace realized too late what he had awakened. From the eternal glory, he broadcast a desperate message to the human fleet. "We surrender. In the name of the Empress, the Vorzani Empire surrenders. Stop this slaughter." Adrian's response was cold. "Bring your ship to a complete stop. Power down all weapons. Eject your FTL cores. If you comply, your crew will be taken prisoner. If you do not comply within 60 seconds, you will be destroyed." Thrace's pride would not allow it. "I am a general of the Vorzani Empire. I do not eject our FTL cores like a coward. I demand honorable terms of surrender." Adrian did not argue. He simply nodded to his weapons officer. A single human ship, one of the Silent Fleet, accelerated to attack speed. It fired a weapon that physics said should not exist, a projectile moving at 90% of light speed. The round hit the eternal glory amidships. The kinetic energy was so great that the ship did not explode so much as evaporate, transforming instantly from a massive dreadnought into a cloud of superheated plasma. General Thrace died without knowing what killed him. 3,000 Vorzani warriors died with him. The human ship responsible continued on to its next target without slowing. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted 6 days. It took that long only because the Vorzani fleet was spread across such a vast area of space. The actual combat was measured in minutes for each engagement. Human forces identified targets, destroyed them, and moved on with mechanical efficiency. By the end of the 6th day, the Grand Fleet simply did not exist. 3,000 warships reduced to wreckage. The Vorzani Empire's military power, built over centuries, erased in less than a week. Caliph watched the casualty reports with numb horror. Over 1 million Vorzani warriors dead. Not just defeated, annihilated. Entire ship lines that had served the Empire since her grandmother's time were extinct. And the humans had lost 47 ships. The mathematics of it were obscene. The exchange ratio was not just favorable to humanity, it was apocalyptic to the Vorzani. For every human ship destroyed, the humans had eliminated over 60 Vorzani vessels. "Why?" Caliph asked Adrian, her voice breaking. "Why was it so one-sided? We are not cowards. Our warriors are brave." "Bravery doesn't matter when you're outmatched. Your people built a military to conquer species less advanced than yourselves. You perfected fighting opponents who couldn't match your technology. Humans built our military to fight ourselves, to fight an enemy just as smart, just as ruthless, just as desperate to survive. We've been fighting human-level intelligence for our entire history." He pulled up historical files, showing Caliph the wars of human history. Not the sanitized versions she had seen before, but the truth. Humans had fought with nuclear weapons, biological plagues, autonomous hunter-killer machines, and artificial intelligences that viewed humanity as the problem to be solved. "We survived all of that," Adrian said. "We learned how to fight wars where both sides had planet-killing weapons, where both sides were willing to do anything to win. Your empire never faced that. You've been the strongest force in your region for so long that you forgot what it means to fight an equal opponent." "We are not equal," Caliph said bitterly. "You proved that." "No," Adrian corrected gently. "We proved that we're willing to do what's necessary to protect our people, and we're very, very good at it, because we've had to be. That's not superiority. That's survival instinct honed over thousands of years of fighting enemies just like us." The Empress appeared on communication channels, her crystalline features aged by grief. She surrendered unconditionally, begging only that the slaughter stop. Humanity accepted the surrender immediately. The killing stopped. But Caliph knew the truth. The Vorzani Empire as it had existed was dead. Its military was gone. Its pride was shattered. And humanity had done it all in less than a week, using only a fraction of its available forces. She looked at Adrian and saw the weight of command aging him. He had won a complete victory, but there was no joy in it. Only exhaustion and relief that it was over. The Vorzani Empire surrendered on the 7th day. Empress Valthira appeared before the galactic community, her crystalline form seeming to have lost its inner light. She accepted all human terms without negotiation, without pride, without the arrogance that had defined Vorzani diplomacy for 3,000 years. Kalith watched her mother's surrender speech from the remembrance, tears flowing freely. The empire her ancestors had built across centuries was humbled in a week. The military tradition that had been the pride of her people was simply gone. And it had happened because her uncle's pride had convinced him that human restraint meant human weakness. The peace terms were unlike anything in galactic history. Humanity did not demand territory. They did not impose tribute or install occupation governments. They did not execute captured Vorzani military leaders or demand reparations. Instead, they demanded something far more unsettling: transformation. The treaty required complete and verified disarmament of all Vorzani offensive military capabilities. The Empire could maintain defensive forces, but no ship capable of aggressive warfare would be permitted. Human observers would be stationed throughout Vorzani space to ensure compliance. But the more radical requirements focused on culture and education. Mandatory exchange programs where Vorzani youth would study on human worlds, joint scientific endeavors, cultural programs designed to build understanding between species. The humans were not trying to conquer the Vorzani Empire. They were trying to change it. Kalith found Adrian alone in his quarters, staring at casualty reports. Over 1 million Vorzani dead. The numbers were final now, verified and recorded. "You destroyed my people," she said quietly. "I destroyed your military," Adrian corrected. "Your people are still alive. Their worlds are intact. Their families are whole, except for those who chose to wage war against civilians. Is there a difference?" Adrian looked at her directly. "Yes. We could have glassed your worlds. We could have killed billions instead of millions. We could have made the Vorzani species extinct. We chose not to." The terrible truth of it settled on Kalith. Humanity had shown restraint even in total war. The Silent Fleet could have destroyed Vorzani colonies, bombarded planets, slaughtered civilians. Instead, they had focused purely on military targets, eliminating the Empire's ability to wage war while leaving its people alive. "After we killed your children, after we attacked your colonies, why show any mercy at all?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "Because we remember what it's like to go too far. We remember wars where we tried to completely destroy our enemies, where we killed not just soldiers, but everyone. We remember what that did to us, how it changed us. We became very good at killing Kalith, but the cost was nearly becoming monsters." He pulled up files from human history, and this time Kalith forced herself to really look. She saw the burned cities of humanity's nuclear wars. She saw the plague victims of biological warfare. She saw the automated kill zones where machines hunted humans for sport. She saw what humanity had done to itself in the name of total victory. "We learned the hardest lesson possible," Adrian continued. "Being able to destroy your enemy completely doesn't mean you should. Because when you do, when you cross that line and exterminate rather than defeat, you become something different. Something that can't go back to being peaceful, even when the war ends. So you showed mercy out of fear? Fear of what you might become? We showed mercy because we know exactly what we're capable of, and it terrifies us," Adrian said simply. "Your uncle thought our restraint was weakness. It's actually the opposite. It takes more strength to stop when you're winning than to keep killing until nothing remains." Over the following weeks, Caliph watched the peace take shape. Human teams arrived in Vorzani space, not as conquerors, but as teachers and observers. They dismantled weapons, yes, but they also helped rebuild damaged infrastructure, shared medical technology, and offered trade agreements on surprisingly fair terms. The Vorzani people struggled with this. They understood conquest, understood subjugation, understood defeat. They did not understand an enemy that won completely, and then offered partnership rather than chains. Caliph attended a meeting of the Vorzani Council, speaking publicly for the first time since the war. The councillors looked at her with suspicion. She was married to a human, compromised by her association with the enemy. "You betrayed us," one councillor accused. "You sided with them against your own people." "I sided with truth," Caliph replied. "I tried to warn our leaders that humanity was not weak, that their restraint was choice, not inability. No one listened." "Because you asked us to show fear," another councillor shouted, "to abandon our pride, our honor, our strength." Caliph felt something harden inside her. She had been quiet too long, diplomatic too long. "Our pride killed 1,000,000 warriors," she said coldly. "Our honor was used to justify murdering human children. Our strength was an illusion, built on conquering species weaker than ourselves. And when we finally faced someone who matched us, we were destroyed in days." The council chamber fell silent. "You want to know what makes humans dangerous?" Caliph continued. "It's not their weapons, though those are terrible enough. It's not their tactics or their technology. It's that they're capable of unimaginable violence and choose mercy anyway. But threaten their children, attack their civilians, and you discover what they spent 10,000 years becoming perfect at." She looked around at the councillors, seeing fear and anger in equal measure on their crystalline faces. "We married to stop a war," she said. "Humans hoped we could be better than our worst instincts. They gave us that chance. My uncle threw it away because he thought patience meant weakness. He learned otherwise, but the lesson cost him everything." Adrian appeared at the council later that day, invited to explain the peace terms. Caliph stood beside him, no longer sure which people were truly hers. The Vorzani councillors asked the expected questions about disarmament timelines and monitoring procedures. Then one asked the question Caliph had been waiting for. "Why not conquer us completely? You have the power. You proved it. Why allow us to maintain any autonomy at all?" Adrian considered his answer carefully. "Because empires built on conquest eventually fall. History, human history, teaches that clearly. When you conquer, you create resentment. That resentment builds until it explodes. Then the cycle repeats." "So you fear rebellion?" "We fear repetition," Adrian corrected. "We don't want to be here in 50 years, having the same conversation, because we conquered instead of partnering. We want the Vorzani to choose peace, not have it forced on them. Because chosen peace lasts. Imposed peace just delays the next war." "But you've disarmed us, made us helpless." "We've removed your ability to threaten others," Adrian said. "That's not the same as helplessness. Your people still control your worlds, your government, your culture. You can still thrive, still achieve great things. You just can't do it by threatening or conquering your neighbors anymore." Another councillor spoke up, voice bitter. "You've made us weak." "No," Caliph interjected. "They've shown us that strength without wisdom is suicide. We had strength. We had the Grand Fleet, the Third Fleet, 3,000 years of military tradition. And in 1 week, it meant nothing against an enemy that understood war better than we did." She stood, addressing the entire council. "Humans spent millennia fighting themselves. They nearly destroyed their own species multiple times. They learned every brutal lesson war can teach. The final lesson, the one purchased with the most blood, was that being able to win wars doesn't mean you should fight them. Pretty words, a counselor muttered, but we remain at their mercy. Yes, Caliph agreed, because we chose pride over wisdom. We chose glory over justice. We killed their children and expected no consequences. My uncle believed humans were weak, and that belief cost us everything. Adrian added quietly, "You're not the first species to mistake our restraint for inability, but you're the first to survive learning the truth. Take that as the gift it is." The months that followed brought transformation. Vorzani youth traveled to human worlds, returning with stories of human culture, human history, human perspectives on war and peace. Joint research projects began producing breakthroughs in medicine and technology. Trade agreements created economic interdependence. Caliph remained with Adrian, no longer a political hostage, but a choice freely made. She became a bridge between species, teaching Vorzani youth the lessons her people had paid so dearly to learn. One evening, a year after the war's end, she stood with Adrian, looking at the stars. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "The killing, the destruction?" "Every day," Adrian said honestly. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that your uncle wouldn't choose peace. I regret every life lost. But I don't regret protecting my people." "Would you do it again, if another species threatened humanity?" "Yes," he said without hesitation, "because that's what the restraint means. We don't want to fight, we don't want to kill, but if we must, we will do it efficiently and completely enough that the threat ends." That's what your people mistook for weakness. The fact that we're capable of terrible things and choose mercy instead. Caliph understood now. Humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or tactics. It was their self-knowledge. They knew what they were capable of in ways the Vorzani never had. They had stared into their own darkness and chose to be better, while never forgetting what that darkness contained. "My people will remember," she said. "Will remember the cost of pride, the price of underestimating an enemy. Will remember that the most dangerous species isn't the one that loves war, but the one that has mastered it so completely they'll do almost anything to avoid it. And everything to end it when they can't," Adrian finished. They stood together in silence, a Vorzani princess and a human commander, bound by vows made to prevent a war, and hardened by the war that came anyway. Behind them, two civilizations learned to build peace from the ashes of pride. And across the galaxy, other species watched and learned the lesson the Vorzani had paid for in blood. That humanity's restraint was not weakness but wisdom, and mistaking one for the other was a fatal error that few survived making.